Rodney, we have really got to talk about your invasion of personal space. Well, I know we promised them a gravy video last week. All right, yeah, we're fitting to go get on it right now. Y'all stick around. I'll show you how. For this recipe, we're going to need 2 cups of beef stock, a package of sliced mushrooms, a cup of ale, some arrowroot powder, some dried rosemary, and a large onion. Tell you what, before we fire into this, why don't you do me a big favor? If you haven't already, why don't you mash that subscribe button, click on the bell icon so you'll get notifications. You know, maybe even give me a big thumbs up, a comment or two, or if you feel so inclined, share me to your social media. I sure would appreciate it. So it's a cold western North Carolina day. It's been snowing. What goes better with a day like that than something nice and hearty, like a nice gravy? I can't think of anything, so let's get after it. We're going to start with dicing up this here onion. It doesn't need to be too small, doesn't need to be too big. Just a medium dice is fine. Pieces about that big be just right. Now we're going to take our saucepan and put in, I don't know, about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. To that, we're going to add some dried rosemary. This really sets it over the top. And we're going to saute it with the onions and the mushrooms and the other spices, because as we've discussed before, when you fry spices, it releases the oil and just makes them that much more tasty. So we're going to go about, let's call that a 1.5 teaspoons of dried rosemary. You can add a little more if you want, put in a little less. To that, we're going to add, any guesses? Y'all ought to know by now, some Bad Byron's butt rub, maybe 1/2 teaspoon. Just enough to dry out the onions. To that, we're going to add our onions that we diced up earlier. And 1 package of sliced mushrooms. Now, we're going to give that a quick saute in the saucepan here until the onions start to get a little translucent and the mushrooms start to kind of shrivel just a little bit. Now, like I said, you're going to want to saute this in the oil on about a medium-high heat. You don't want to go too hot. You don't want to cook it all the way through either. Just hot enough to get those spices to where they're really starting to fill the room with smell. The onions turn translucent and the mushrooms start to shrink a little. Whoo! Whoo, if you could smell this. All right, now, you want to take your beer and deglaze the bottom of that pan. That's 1 cup of ale. Make sure you scrape the bottom of that pan real good. It's called deglazing. That's a word that'll get you fired around the Waffle House. Bring that back up to a boil. Make sure the bottom of that pan is good and clean, deglazed. And guess what happens to the rest of that bottle of beer? You guessed it. Beer. Innocent Gun Original from Scotland. If you see this in the grocery store, buy it. All right, the pan is all deglazed, and as you can see, it's up to a nice rolling simmer. This would be a good time to add our beef stock, 2 cups. We're going to allow that to come back up to a boil. Then we're going to let it simmer for a while. Okay, as you can see, we've got it up to a bit of a boil here. We're going to let it boil for just a few minutes. And then we're going to cut down the heat considerably and let it simmer for about an hour. By the way, this gravy is the one I was telling you about, and I'll link it up here. I was telling you about, I was served with the sausage and potato air fryer deal from last week. So like I said, the link's right up there. Go check that out. Put them together. Oh, you ain't gonna go wrong. Okay, now, we've been simmering for about an hour. Here's what our pot of goodness should look like. If it's mixed right, it should look like a cup of milk. Now we're going to slowly add that in and stir it really slow under a medium-low heat. You're going to add a little at a time. Now it may take a few minutes to where you start to see results, but again, just go slow. I'll jack that heat up a little bit. Looks like we're going to need a bit more. Now it's getting there. That right there is about British consistency. I like it just a little bit thicker than that. We're going to put the rest of that in there. See what that gets us. Getting closer. It's getting closer, but I think I'd like it just a hair thicker. I'm going to mix up some more arrowroot powder. So here's another heaping serving spoon of arrowroot powder. Tablespoon rather, sorry. We'll whisk it around, make sure all the lumps get out. It's in about between a quarter and a half a cup of water. Again, you don't want to water it down too much. Okay, let's add half of that. See if it gets the thickness we want. It's getting there. Let's add the rest of it. And that ought to put us where we want to be. 3 tablespoons. Now, we'll let that simmer for about another 10 minutes. We'll give it a taste. So here it is. Look at that simmering pot of goodness right there. At this point, you could pack this gravy away and put it in the freezer, save it for your next camping trip. Or in my case, I'm going to use it, half of it anyway, for our supper tonight. And the other half, I'm going to use on the short that I'm making for next week. So y'all stick around for that. So let's give it a taste, or as they say back in the homeland, I will have a wee taste. That's the gravy you want right there. I ain't even going to kid you. That is hardly fit to eat, but I promise you, I'm going to keep going until I find a good spot. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all the ships at sea, I think that's about all we got time for this week on Eating Good in the Woods. If you haven't done so already, make sure you click subscribe, check the bell icon, leave a comment, and a big old thumbs up. And remember one thing, go out there, be nice to each other. I love you. God bless you. Bye now.